Thank you, and thank you so much for sticking with us. So this is the third panel. The title is Translating Science into Policy and Social Trust. Well, before we start our conversation, I would like to extend my gratitude for Shirley, for CAPRI to host this event, for this timely conversation. So as we know, CAPRI really is about making policy recommendation. But we also know that policy cannot be truly effective without good communication. And that's what this panel really is about. While scientific information is still instrumental for policy making, policy formation, I think it really takes good communication to mobilize the society, to garner the public support. We are in a time that we are seeing growing crisis in public trust, right? I think scientific information is very much politicized, questioned, and a lot of times filtered through competing media narratives and online ecosystem. So for a policy to be truly effective, how can we use effective communication strategy to make the information itself not only understandable, but also credible and actionable? I think that's what this conversation really is about. And we kind of exchanged some ideas last night over dinner, so I know this is gonna be a fun conversation. So for my two panelists, so honored to be with you for this conversation. I think I'm gonna start with a broad question to start our conversation. So Dr. Pottinger, you are based in the United States. Dr. Ma, you are based in Taiwan. In both societies, I think we are seeing rising political polarization and fragmented information environment. From your individual perspective, how have these changes affected public trust in scientific information, scientific institution? And are there any noticeable differences in how trust is built, challenged, and maintained across different societies? I think we can start with Dr. Pottinger.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, Shirley. We're delighted to be back. If we could answer this question, we'll be ready for the next pandemic. Unfortunately, to say that we do not have all the answers for this. I would say that public health mistrust has always been there, right? It's just that our polarization and the fragmentization is accelerating this distrust and bringing more people under the umbrella who may not have been distrustful before, but because we're getting all of this media out and everyone's living in their own reality depending on how they consume media and the news and how they, what they're looking at on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, that policy directed at an entire population is very difficult now, right? We have all these people with differing views, and I would say a lot of policymakers have this notion if you just put out a message that you're gonna hope it's gonna translate to these different subgroups. And we're using, in a 21st century media infrastructure, we're still using 20th century communications strategies, and it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work going forward, and we're not going to achieve what we're hoped to achieve by getting people to really follow public health policy in a way that protects you and me and everyone else. Societal differences, I think it really comes down to institutional trust. We all know that after living through COVID, that trust takes a very long time to build, right? Years and years of credible information, but it's so easy to lose it when it happens. And we all saw that with COVID. And when scientific policy is associated with a political group, it's not good for any of us, right? Especially, let's take, for example, of course, the mask wearing. I know you all have trauma the instant you hear about mask wearing, at least those in the US do, right? Because it's associated with, oh, you must be a Democrat if you're wearing a mask. But let's say you're a Republican and you want to wear a mask, all of a sudden you're betraying your kind. Do you know what I mean? So we have to get away from the politicization of policy that affects everybody. But when politicians become scientific experts and scientific experts become politicians, it's a losing scenario for us.
So I think you're saying that, scientific information is highly politicized and we are all living in our all information bubble, echo chamber. So it is really hard to break through. Dr. Ma, are you seeing the same thing in Taiwan?
Exactly. So, well, I couldn't agree more for Ian's comments on that. We now, I think also yesterday we have a lot of discussion about current days, the news comes so fast. And it moves so fast, the scientific understanding couldn't catch up at all, right? It's actually have no time for science to build the evidence or to explain what's going on, or people couldn't really want to listen to what we are going to say or anything. So what I see is to build a public trust, we have to build this before the crisis, right? Not during the crisis, because during the crisis, people just have so many information that kind of all the bomb of the news and you are kind of chasing by all these informations. But how to build this public trust beforehand, that's how we scientists or scientific institutions should do. And I think the same thing in US and in Taiwan, well, I should say before, but I hope also still, scientific institutions are viewed as a neutral and authoritative agency or institution. Then for this, I think it's very important to build a very grounded scientific truth. Of course, in science, it's really difficult to say truth, but the uncertainties, we couldn't really answer all the questions, but we have to provide the information with uncertainties, with transparency. We talk about earthquake, talk about risk. Whenever I say risk, I talk about earthquake risk, so pardon me for that. So for the risk, I always say there's always a lot of uncertainty. Also, the issue we just addressed about nuclear power plants, that was a debate 10 years ago, or even now still. We have to face some risk, but how can we really communicate this risk from a scientific background? And scientific knowledge is also limited, so we have to be honest. But once this information was taken in a political view, that makes things really complicated. So everyone look at the scientific evidence in different perspective. In the same time, is also the institution, how can really stay neutral, and then also bring your grounded truth or your knowledge, and keep this communication with general public, with media, and that's actually very important. Before the crisis, we actually continue to bring this long-term trust by communication, and also to talk to the press. And sometimes social media is very difficult to control, but somehow the news or the press is still important to deliver our knowledge in a very artistic way. So for me, I would say to build our public trust is a long-term maintenance, and it's built on our scientific grounded truth. Thank you.
If I could just add to that, I think this is a clear distinction between Taiwan and the US. You talked about building institutional communication structure that can sustain political changes. In the US, we are moving farther and farther away from that, frankly, right? We have RFK Jr. talking about his MAHA movement and vaccines and, changing the childhood vaccine schedule with a group of people who have no expertise in this just because they all agree with him. So in the US, we are not building institutional communication structures in our public health policy. And I would say it's even more, polarized now than even in the first Trump administration, because he's put in charge a man who is not a scientist, who's not a medical doctor, but is promoting, I'll just call it fake science. And our FDA is not approving very important drugs that are for rare diseases, and going against the scientists who recommend approval. We are not in a fact-based society in the US. It's not guiding our public health policy at the moment. And there does seem to be a slight shift. I think it's not going over that well with the public, with the measles outbreak, all these things that are happening that the public is starting to push back against. And you can see with the change in the new CDC. I mean, he's a temporary acting director, but that there is some acknowledgement in the administration that maybe the public isn't all on board with the MAHA movement. And so it's a little, you can see the society differences, at least with Taiwan and in the US. We're moving a little farther away from where scientists would like to be. And sorry, I'm gonna just add one more thing. As I was thinking through this health communications, this bridge, the divide really between politicians and scientists. Scientists make terrible communicators. They don't teach this to us. Right, like I would say the majority of scientists are actually terrible communicators to the public. They have a really hard time translating their very technical work. You're agreeing with me. Technical work into something that most people can understand. It's a very nuanced way of communicating. And they should really start teaching this in universities as part of science programs. And I think CAPRI here should have a role in this, right? Like we should do a whole discussion about what does a course look like for teaching this, for teaching scientists really how to communicate. I promise you, they teach statistics, they teach all sorts of things, but communication is definitely not one of them.
I feel like that comment very much addressed my second question for you, which is what we learned from COVID-19 pandemic management and the legacy of it. So I think I can move on and asking Dr. Ma, your observation specifically in Taiwan, where your expertise is in earthquake awareness, preparedness. Earthquake, typhoon, natural disasters is basically just part of our everyday life. So what are the biggest challenges that you are seeing in keeping this disaster awareness on public agenda when the society otherwise is very much preoccupied by other political, economic issues? How do you keep those awareness alive and then the society ready to respond, address such issue?
Oh, thank you. Well, I keep kind of reply to Ian's comments, and the reason why we choose science most of is because we don't want to talk. That's why we choose science in the first place. But then, I mean, as earthquake scientists, as our moderator was saying, like, earthquake, typhoon, flooding are daily life in Taiwan. Every year we have to meet this challenge. And the biggest shock, we learned hard lessons in Taiwan. The biggest shock for me is 1999 Jeju earthquake. I just got my PhD, earthquake science before, is in computing. It's all the data I download from the computer and I do the simulation, and that's it. Until 1999 Jeju earthquake occurred, I was shocked. I was in Hsinchu. Whenever people ask me as a seismologist, I feel terrified by earthquakes. Of course, I'm a human being as well, right? But for the earthquake, the second day I went to the field, and I was shocked by what I see. And I realized what I learned in science is not like physics, chemistry, or mathematics. It's something related to the society. I have to do the job with the communication. And to understand that Taiwan actually has the fact that this occurs once every 20, 30 years for extreme ones, right? And after 1999, we have 2016 Melon earthquake, 2018 Hualien, 2022 Taidong. I apologize, I remember all the years. 2024 Hualien earthquake. I just mentioned the other day about this Taroko and how region hotel did so well for the people during this earthquake. And so from that, we started to learn that we need to communicate with people. And so we also, for science, we should develop, now people know about earthquake early warning. How can we really bring the science into practice, right? Earthquake early warning is one of the important products to somehow, and in the beginning, people also feel like, how can I do with that 3 seconds? Well, you can actually protect yourself in 3 seconds. But the other thing, important thing is the infrastructure. Right, the gas pipeline, we can shut down the gas, the high-speed rail, the MRT, now it's become in practice. Okay, so that's one of the things. The other thing I would like to mention is also about the risk for earthquake scenario. As earlier the keynote speaker, Professor Barrow mentioned about, we couldn't do prediction. I'm sorry, I keep put everything into earthquakes. We couldn't do earthquake prediction. So whenever I enter US, and then they will ask me, so what is your expertise? I say, I do earthquake studies. So they will say, okay, so when will be the next earthquake in California? And I often say, well, anytime. And they say, oh, you come to the right place in California. I say, well, you've never been to Taiwan. We have more. We couldn't do earthquake prediction, but we can do preparation. And that's how we do. We do earthquake scenario. Like for Taipei Basin, we have a Sanjiao Fault. With all that exposure, how can we do the scenario to see, once it happens, what's the weak points in our society? And so we have a better building code, and also we bring this to industry partners to somehow also the extreme events, the contingency for industry, and also continuation of the business. That's very important as well. And also for the high tech, we say like, well, Taiwan is a high tech. We have all the earthquakes as well. How can we reduce the impact of next large earthquake to the industry partner and to our very important economic partner? So that's what we've been doing, and I think in science, in the past couple decades, I tried to link science to engineer and also the policy making, and I'm glad our government actually somehow come up with our idea and then have a good policy making to assure our preparation for our next big one. Thank you.
That must be nice.
It is nice. Thank you, Dr. Ma. So last question before we end this conversation. Looking ahead, I believe technology will continue to play a role in policy communication. So we are seeing the role of social media and increasingly AI. From your perspective, do you feel like these new technology is helping policy communication in a way that reduce the complexity of the issue, engage the audience, or do you feel like they are risking the the essence of the issue itself?
You want me to start? So I think we're presented with actually an opportunity, and I think that that's a viewpoint that maybe we need to really embrace, which is that the generative AI and the social media, if we can train our public health people to really become literate in, producing videos, messaging, in the same way that the people who are trying to produce videos that, is about false information, we can get ahead of the message rather than chasing debunking videos and really pre-bunk, right? To put out messages and allow our messages to get across. I mean, when I was at CEC, to get anything approved to be put out takes forever. If you want to publish a paper, it will take you sometimes upward of a year to get your paper out because there's so many levels of approval. Well, we need to change this notion in our institutions to be able to really combat and meet the moment of social media. We always talk about how social media is bad for our society, but why not think of ways to make it good and useful and informative? And not just chasing down, this person said this. And the good and bad thing about social media is that it democratized information and science for people, right? Like, think about COVID. All of a sudden, people were talking about genetic mutations and replication models of viruses and reading preprint journal articles that no one ever did before, right? That was really a good thing. We had a lot of positives come out of COVID. We had wastewater surveillance now is used globally. We have a lot of surveillance detection methods, but we can also use the moment, the social media and all of that to really get our message across if our institutions can shift and become more, rather than be reactive, to be proactive in our messaging.
Perfect. Dr. Ma?
Well, I would say AI really saves us a lot of time and really efficient. And I enjoy so much of cloud AI. I don't know whether any one of you do coding. It's like, in the new year, I was trying to give some data. I said, give me this cross correlation function, and then they just wrote the code in 5 seconds. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, so AI really bring a lot of, save our time and efficiency. But in the same time, we all know that they simplify the problems. Well, it's always pro and cons. So in the same time, it can actually bring this complexity of science into simple form that, as we talk about communication, so people can understand what we are doing. But in the same time, as we also say, like, because they simplify the problem, so people adopt this idea and they don't change. However, we know our knowledge changes with time, and even with, if we're talking about the time of the crisis, during the crisis, the information also changes with time. And that is really difficult to change their mindset because that's what they read or what AI feed them. So again, as bringing to the very first question about the public trust, or to say, how can we trust the information in AI? But AI needs training data, right? So we need to bring in more data and also scientific base to train AI into a better form. In the same time, to bring in the message of uncertainty. I know uncertainty is so difficult to communicate because usually people will ask me yes or no. Or earlier we talked about nuclear power plants. A lot of risk, concern about an earthquake, and also the death war. So they often say, well, yes or no, but we know in the society or in the science, there's no zero risk. It's how we manage that. So come back to that is, I think AI really brings us a good opportunity. And I think definitely that's a new era. And I think we just have to adapt to that. In the same time, we also have to train our community or the people to put uncertainty in mind, in the same time to update your information from time to time to really bring in the joy of the AI era. Thank you.
All right, so to conclude our panel, I think once again to think about policy formation, not just the policy itself, scientific information, but how do you communicate such policy so it's credible, it's understandable, and it's actionable. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Pottinger, Dr. Ma.